What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning in to this very special segment of For the People podcast. And I am, of course, your humble host, Niko House. We are live right now on Twitter, Rockfin, Rumble, and of course, YouTube. And I'm here with a very special guest. Most of you may know her from her 2016 run, but she's back at it again. And a lot of us were happy to hear that there was some alternatives to some of these other candidates that are running the race that maybe some of us had some hope for, but it kind of let us down. I'm not going to lie. So I would like to welcome to the show, actually, for the very first time, Dr. Jill Stein. What's going on, Jill? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, all things considered, however we can do in a genocide,
Yeah.
I consider it's hard to say you're doing good, but, I'm here to fight another day, and a lot of people want to fight another day. And that's what's happening. There's a big fight. It's really exciting. I'm in New York, and we are in an all out, slam dunk battle to get on the ballot here so that we have an alternative to empire and oligarchy, which is what we're fighting here.
So speaking of which, we're going to get into the technical stuff, but a lot of people know you as like the Green Party presidential candidate, former Green Party nominee. A lot of people know what you stand for, but I actually feel like a lot of people don't know you from the beginning. And I actually, if you don't mind, would like to know what actually made you get involved in politics. Because this is something you've been fighting. I know that you've even held office before, and it's a fight that you have not given up. So I'm curious, what has given you this conviction to get involved in politics and refuse to bow out?
Well, I describe myself as a mother on fire, but before I was a mother on fire, I was actually a kid on fire. Going way back, it comes up a lot now because people often ask me, what am I doing as a Jew, crusading against a Holocaust being committed by the state of Israel. And, going way back, I was raised right after the Holocaust. I grew up just after the Second World War in a Jewish community, attending a synagogue. And, the community was very struggling with this existential crisis of how can people do this to each other. And I was really raised on that you can't stand by when a genocide is being committed. It's the responsibility not only of the perpetrators, but of the bystanders. And a genocide should never happen again to anyone, and so I never thought I would actually be fighting a genocide, but I just grew up on activism. I was an activist from the get-go, and I had gone to medical school to struggle in on the struggle for healthcare and for health justice, and really saw, and this was like before Israel came into the picture here, but I was really fighting as an activist in our communities for, fighting climate racism, and environmental racism and health racism.
And discrimination, is a big deal.
Across the board, and and workers struggle for decent wages. And I, saw very quickly as a healthcare provider that healthcare, as we know it, is not going to meet our needs, and people get sick long before they come into the clinic. And this is an assault basically by corporate America in every dimension of our lives. Our degraded corporate food system, our dirty air, our polluted water, poverty, which is the number 4 cause of death in this country. So I was moved to go upstream and work with communities to fight on these issues. And I kept thinking, surely we will get to critical mass around healthcare, because everybody needs healthcare as a human right. We should have healthcare through a single payer Medicare for all system. I kept moving from one fight to another, and we kept losing one fight after another as oligarchy got stronger and stronger, and money gets more and more concentrated in the hands of very few. I grew up during the Vietnam War, and that was like my first real issue, was fighting the war in Vietnam, which just seemed crazy. I wasn't really politically very informed, but why were we fighting, and sending our young people to die in Vietnam, and why were we killing Vietnamese? What did it have to do with us? So at any rate, I grew up seeing how absurd our political system is and was and continues to be. And I never bought into either political party. I never drank the Kool-Aid for the Democrats because I saw them leading the charge on the Vietnam War back in the 1960s and the 70s. And I grew up as part of the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement and the abortion movement, and just saw how much we could do when we are active and when we're in the streets and we're making demands. And even though Richard Nixon was sitting in the White House, we were in the streets and we were getting basically, wins across the board, from, the Supreme Court ruling on Roe v. Wade to, bringing the troops home from Vietnam to.
It kind of showed you that the power really did lie in the people that were organizing in the streets, despite the fact that people are convinced still even, that the president, you got to get somebody in the White House in order for you to get the change that we need. That's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, not at all. And, it really lies in us. And do we have the courage of our convictions? Because if we do, we can push through our demands. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. So, going for the lesser evil or submerging yourself in beneath some corporate predator, who's not quite as bad as the other one, that gets us exactly where we've gotten. It's like the politics of fear has delivered everything that we were afraid of. All the reasons we were told to vote for the lesser evil, that's exactly what we've gotten, from, immigrant bashing to, the climate catastrophe to endless wars and genocide, and we have the supposed lesser evil party now leading the way on genocide. What greater, hallmark of fascism is there than that? We don't have to wait for Donald Trump for fascism to be here and, to look at the heads getting bashed in now on our campuses, here on the streets. I'm in New York City, and the Bay Ridge, annual observation of the Nakba, the cops were out just like terrorizing people completely unprovoked. And, this is where you saw cops randomly attacking people who were just peacefully marching, throwing them down on the ground and then punching them. It was brutal. People were really brutalized, like what's going on our campuses right now, where the riot police are brought in to create a riot. They are causing the violence. And, this is crazy. And this is what goes with empire. When you have an empire abroad, you pay the price at home in your democracy. Our democracy is really under assault. So at any rate, it was seeing all that, even way back in the 60s, that got me to be really a dedicated activist. And I did not want anything to do with political parties until Ralph Nader's campaign. And then I saw, wow, that's a different kind of political party. And I realized you could have basically a coalition of grassroots groups that are people powered, for the people, not corrupted by corporate money or the political parties of corporations, which is what the Democrats and Republicans are. So at the tender young age of 50, I got political, but never before that.
But so basically you would just, before you would consider yourself just an activist, and then later on you were like, okay, I gotta try to do something a little bit more organized and focused, and started getting into politics, basically.
Exactly. I got tricked into running for office is what happened. After I was active in Nader's campaign, and then I got sort of tricked by the Green Party that was saying, just, run those issues, but make it a campaign for governor and talk to more people. And that's true. When you're running for office, you can, speak to not just, single issue groups of what you happen to be working on. And I got tricked into running for office out of desperation, because I saw social movement after social movement just collapse underneath the tightening grip of oligarchy and the parties of war on Wall Street. So that's how I got kind of, fooled into running for office. But I
So,
discovered, wow, this is really different. And people are raring to go. People can smell a rat, and they smell a rat in the system. And if you're outside of that rat system, you can start having like a really meaningful and empowering conversation. And, I think there's enormous power in that. And that's kind of how I got into this to start with.
So you ran in 2016. I had the pleasure of being actually one of your surrogates in that 2016 campaign. Our first time meeting officially was in Michigan, and I was moved by not only your platform but just having the courage of your convictions, because we saw a lot of politicians who started sounding like true leftists or independent-minded anti-war politicians, and then the moment it was convenient, they played their part, endorsed Hillary, or switched and flipped to Trump. But you once again, you just kind of kept the courage of your convictions. Then you didn't run in the last election. So with this election, it's pretty well known by now. You started out in the camp to some degree of Cornel West, but then you broke free and then decided to run again. So were you already considering running, or what made you decide to not stay with the West camp and just say, you know what, I'm going to just do my own thing and run again? What made you decide to make that decision?
I decided to run very reluctantly. I was not going to run, and I didn't want to run. And in fact, Ajamu Baraka and myself had a big fight that went on for 2 weeks. We had helped to persuade Cornel West to get out of the very difficult situation he was in with the People's Party. And we said, hey, we've got a good party structure for you. We can support your campaign and give you what you need and ballot lines. Because at the end of the day, you can have a great voice out there, but if you're not on the ballot, the empire doesn't give a squat about your running if you can't actually challenge power. You can't challenge power unless you're on the ballot pretty much all across the country, or nearly. You got to be on 48, 49, or 50 states. That's, otherwise you're not a real threat. And so Ajamu and I, when we learned that Dr. West was going to go his own way, which we really understood, because it's very hard to build a relationship with a political party under the heat of a presidential campaign while you're on the firing line. It's hard to run for higher office. And if you haven't already developed relationships with a party, it's hard to do that, while you're under fire. And
that's something you normally have to start about 2 or 3 years in advance. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you don't want your first race to be running for president, because there's just a lot of tricks of the trade that you learn by doing it. Otherwise, first race, people are going to make lots of mistakes. They always do. People often make them in the second race, especially in small parties where you don't have a machine that's going to run your campaign for you. And you don't have like a campaign in a box that's got a database. It's got an agenda. It has a fundraising machine. You don't have any of that in a small party. You really have to build relationships with people and figure out how you do it, especially getting on the ballot, which is impossible unless you've done it a lot and you have a big grassroots network that can help you do it. Or you're like Robert F. Kennedy and you're an aristocrat. You're a political aristocrat, and you've got very deep pockets, and you have a super PAC, and you've got lots of billionaires that want stuff from you. So they're going to fund you with their big money.
Hell, even he hasn't had the easiest time getting on the ballot as well, even with all of that. So it just lets you know how important experience is when it comes to trying to get on the ballot when you're running for president.
Yeah, that's really true. And we knew that Cornel had too much integrity to be an RFK. He wasn't going to be raising corporate money, so he wasn't going to be on the ballot. And he walked away from, at the time it was said to be $4 or $5 million worth of ballot lines, but now it's probably worth a whole lot more, because we had already had ballot access in the big states, the very expensive states, the ones that will make you bankrupt if you're going to try to pay for that. And that's like California and Texas and Florida, especially. And we had all of those. And for Dr. West to strike out on his own, there's no way he's going to be able to get those states. In fact, he's already missed California and Texas, I think, and telling people to write him in Texas. But you can't see, this is why you have to know this game here, because you can't be a write-in in Texas. Texas won't count write-ins. The rules are different in every state, and they change from year to year. So it takes a really big experienced network to watchdog this stuff and make it happen. So when we knew that there would be no anti-genocide candidate on the ballot, there would be no pro-worker candidate on the ballot, enough to really be a full-bore campaign, that we would have Trump, Biden, and RFK. That's what the choices were going to be if we didn't have a Green Party candidate in the mix. And I wanted it to be a Jamu, and he wanted it to be me. And
yeah, he said that. I just had him on the show. He was like, yeah, me and Jill were going at it back and forth, trying to figure out who the candidate was going to be.
And he won the argument, is the bottom line, hard to persuade him otherwise. So that's how I came to jump in the race. Above all, I couldn't bear the thought of our ballot lines going to waste while we have 3 pro-genocide, pro-war, anti-worker, anti-climate campaigns that will be on the ballot. We'll have those 3 choices, and that's it. I mean, to me, I couldn't forgive myself if I let that happen. And to let our work of the last 20 years, which has been all about, developing our power and the ability to challenge empire and oligarchy, that's what we have ballot lines for. And the thought of them not being used, or, someone coming in who had no idea what they were doing, that was just being recruited at the last minute, that really hadn't planned this out. It was just, the timing of it was incredibly difficult. And when Dr. West decided he would go his own way, we didn't have any advance notice. We heard that day that he was, we heard maybe it was the day before, but I was then told I could go to their meeting on Monday and make my case. And my case was, if you guys walk away from this race, someone's going to have to jump in from the Green Party. And it could very well be me, because there aren't a lot of people who can mobilize for a race in the course of 3 weeks. We had to have a fully mobilized race in order to use our ballot line in California. We had to have a bunch of paperwork done. And we had helped Dr. West do that and helped him kind of come up to speed so he could be the candidate. And then we heard, basically without any notice, that he was going to go his own way. And there we were, so we kind of had to jump in really fast.
Got you. So I want to move on. So a criticism that I've gotten in, somebody emailed me because they wanted me to ask, and I think it's a valid question. One of the things that you've actually been known for is your anti-war stance. I mean, pretty damn consistent. You've been against not only all the anti-war, or not only all the wars that the U.S. empire and the West have tried to start, but also you've been a proponent of fighting the propaganda, principally, because that's how they get the consent from the U.S. public to go into these wars. But in 2020, you endorsed Howie Hawkins, who admittedly did not have your anti-war stances, nor was he as fervent about fighting the propaganda that leads us to those wars. And a lot of people really wanted to understand and want to know, why did you endorse Howie, on knowing that he kind of doesn't really have the same anti-war, anti-U.S. imperialist propaganda stances that you have?
Yeah, so, I did not silence myself on the issues and the positions, and I continued, to fight for all of those anti-war positions. I did not endorse Howie Hawkins until the day he was nominated. So I did not assist him whatsoever in the nomination. And, Howie is invaluable on domestic policy, and he's terrible on foreign policy.
That's a very good description. That's a very good description.
So I continue to work closely with Howie on domestic policy, and he is a great asset. He does not have support within the party or anywhere that I know of for his foreign policy positions. He's really been sidelined in foreign policy. So it's not like he is a threat to what we're doing and the positions that we're advancing. Yet he is a great asset for our domestic agenda. And so we've kind of, found this way to work together and sideline the areas that we don't work together.
So here, I understand that part, but a lot of people basically want to know, like, why didn't you? So you could have worked with him, but a lot of people want to know, why didn't you just sit that one out as far as endorsing him? Because I understand, like, I'm a pragmatic person myself too. Like, if I can work with somebody on a particular issue, I'm going to do so, as long as I believe that their intentions are pure, even if I disagree with them on other issues. So a lot of people just they just want clarification on why even endorse him, instead of just, hey, I'm not going to go against him. I'm not going to fight him for it. I'm going to still speak on my issues and work with him, but I'm going to sit this one out because what you're principally known for in most leftist and independent circles, and even the conservatives who have respect for you, is specifically your anti-war stances.
Yeah, and I will say that I did not participate in Howie's campaign. So although, as the prior candidate, I felt like I needed to make a pro forma endorsement of the party's candidate. But I did not actually do work for that campaign, and I continued to resist, or should I say, I continued to push.
Yeah, that might be a bad choice.
I continued to push our anti-war stance without skipping a beat, or missing a step.
So, good stuff. So as far as anti-war is concerned, everybody at this point, I feel like, knows when it comes to the issue of Gaza and Palestine, you're definitely the best candidate. So can you compare your stances on Palestine versus, because at this point, technically you are still running against a guy like Cornel West, and there are some people who are still being pulled in both directions. And I understand the ballot line argument and the pragmatic argument, but you also know that voters aren't necessarily pragmatic when it comes to this type of stuff. So how do you separate yourself and your stance on Gaza versus a candidate that has similar talking points now on the same issue?
So, I think this is a question of strategy, because on the substance of the issues, Dr. West and Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia.
Thank you very much for mentioning them. I should have mentioned them too, because they do have a great chance as well.
They're awesome. They're awesome. All these candidates are. And I think my area of disagreement is, I think we need to be strategic. And I think we don't have time to waste. We don't have lives to lose either. We are sitting now on a death watch for 2 million people in Gaza. It's a miracle, hour by hour, that they have not yet been wiped out. Half the population was just forced out of Rafah after they were forced into Rafah and herded like cattle and then shot at like fish in a barrel. About 1 million of them have left with no place to go and nowhere to get food or water or have shelter or sanitation or anything. It's nothing short of miraculous, and among them is 600,000 children who are injured, sick, traumatized, stressed, and starved. It's just unbelievable what's happening. And in my view, this is not a time to be focused on your own stuff. This is really about building our power as a people-powered grassroots movement. And we are so much on the same page on all of the issues, not just Gaza and Palestine and Ukraine and, workers' justice and all that. We're completely aligned. So our campaign has actually been seeking collaboration from the start, Absolutely. Yes. With all of these campaigns, we've been trying to explore, solidarity, and to varying degrees, that's moving forward or it's not. But I feel like it's really helpful. See, it's hard for us to push our own campaign. Our own campaign is the one that will be on the ballot. So it just seems self-serving for us to say, hey, you got to get behind our campaign because we are the only one that can actually challenge empire here. Mm-hmm. And fingers crossed, it's too soon to say, but we are going really full bore in New York. And let me just comment about that, because that is absolutely miraculous. New York is empire's last stand. This is where the empire pulled out all the stops to block us by tripling the requirement. It used to be 15,000 signatures in 6 weeks, which was really hard to do. And then they tripled it secretly in a budget bill led by the former Governor Cuomo, who changed the rules of the game roughly 2 years ago without anybody knowing about it. So it wasn't even debated. And New Yorkers like having choices, like Americans everywhere, and want those choices and are tearing their hair out and screaming angry that they want those choices now. So this was really foisted on people, and people are not happy about it. And yet you have these impossible requirements. Now add to that, you've got RFK, who's very unusual as an independent. Well, he's kind of like a, what's his name? The guy back in the 90s who challenged Ross Perot. He's kind of like Ross Perot in that he's got a lot of independent money. So he's not your grassroots alternative. He's kind of your corporate alternative. He is, for all of his protestations, he's the Zionist candidate. He is a warmonger candidate. His promises about climate are very minute and off base. He supports market-based solutions and basically more of what's not working.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, where he started versus where he ended up is a mystery to me. I mean, not a mystery, I guess, because you look at the money and actually no, because some of it still is a mystery. Because actually, if you look at RFK's stances before he ran, he was actually on the side of Palestinians, and then out of nowhere he flipped. Like, I mean, it was something I've never seen before. And you can make the argument that some of it's money. But there's also just the fact that you just got to have the courage of your conviction. And it's sad to say that he has not really had that. And it's not just RFK. I actually personally took issue with some of even Dr. West's statements, but like they weren't really, I didn't know where he stood, basically, one of those type of situations. Yes. So I was happy when you entered the race. I'm like, oh, thank God. I actually was saying this. A while ago, I was like, I think just going to enter the race. It was going to be, I said it was going to be Jill or Ajamu, because there's no way they're sitting back and looking at this and thinking, oh God, like, wow, we have so much hope for the future. We're in the middle of a genocide and we have no idea where a lot of these candidates stand. They don't have any access to anything. So I figured you were going to enter the race eventually. So, I'm happy to hear that. Go ahead.
Just one more thing about New York as empire's last stand. RFK got into this and he basically bought up all or nearly all of the professional signature collectors. And when you have to lift a mountain, in a very short period of time, there's no way. It has never been done. It's never been done just by a grassroots campaign without professional support. But by the time we had the funding that we needed to hire that professional support, they had all been bought out by RFK because he's got limitless deep pockets, having a billionaire running mate now on top of his super PAC with a couple of billionaire donors, so he's playing the traditional money game, even while he pretends to be a reformer who will get money out of politics. It's like a case of don't look at what I do, just look at what I say. It's that kind of hypocrisy. But he bought up all the professionals. So what's happening in New York now is nothing short of a miracle. We are at least going to get to the 45,000. It's 45,000, but then you have to double it because the Democrats have proudly announced, if you can believe that, they are that clueless that they have proudly said the quiet part out loud. Number one, that they have hired an army of corporate lawyers in order to nitpick the signatures and try to get them thrown out for like having a middle initial instead of a middle name, because your signature is supposed to match your registration. So if there are little technical details, they're going to throw the names out, which is why we've got to try to get twice as many. And then they also went public about hiring infiltrators, which I think they have long been doing. And I think that accounts for some of the, internal chaos of small parties, small grassroots parties.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
We didn't need to see their
there was a job listing on recently that was posted showing that they wanted people to go to your event, RFK event, Dr. Cornel West events, and gather information. Yeah, I saw.
Yes, exactly. They're hiring infiltrators too. So they're pulling out all the stops. But all that said, there's been a huge uprising, especially from the anti-war, anti-genocide community, that says we can't let this pass. And just to like convey what an unbelievable perfect storm this is, there are going to be 3 pro-genocide candidates on the ballot: RFK, Biden, and Trump. They're all pro-war, pro-genocide, and they compete with each other to see who can get to World War III and super genocide the fastest. That's kind of where they're coming from. So maybe they're going to divide the genocide vote. There will be one campaign. There's only one that's on track right now for being on the ballot across the country to truly challenge empire. One campaign, which is anti-war, anti-genocide, pro-worker, and pro-climate emergency. So that, plus, abolishing student debt, making public higher education free, healthcare as a human right for everyone. So we kind of have a monopoly through no action of our own, but we're the only ones who've been able to get on the ballot that represents really the progressive agenda, the truly progressive agenda. So that's there as a potentially unifying force. And when you have 4 full-bore campaigns dividing up a vote, you can win it. You can win the race with as little as 26%. 26% can be a plurality in a 4-way race that can win the majority of the electoral college, but you need the plurality, and you can get to a plurality with as little as 26% of the vote. And when you look at, well, who doesn't want a genocide? It's as much as 68%, according to a Reuters poll. Others polls, it may be less, but it's a strong majority. So there are the numbers here. Then throw in 44 million young people locked into student debt, or 100 million locked into college debt, or into medical debt, or 63% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. People are being thrown under the bus. They're sick and tired of it. They're very clear in pollings. And if you just talk to human beings on the street, it's no secret that people are fighting angry, and there's an uprising happening. And this is a perfect storm, given that there will be 3 pro-genocide candidates splitting the vote. All bets are off. And as Alice Walker said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We have a lot of power here. We've got the numbers. We have the moral authority. We've got the International Court of Justice on our side here.
And ICC, Maryland.
Yeah. There is really the potential here, if we are strategic, if we complete our ballot access, and once we're on in New York, if we get on in New York, it's off to the races. There are 2 major, ballot drives following that, but they're not nearly as bad as New York. If we do New York, the rest is, it's eminently doable. We are on our way, and it's a huge shot across the bow of the empire that a grassroots campaign could do this without help from paid petitioners. We are an unstoppable force now.
So New York is a big deal, like you say, and specifically RFK, because he's going to be able to buy access to New York. That honestly, I feel like he would be your biggest challenge. It wouldn't be the Biden. Well, yeah, Biden, because he's a Democrat, and it probably definitely wouldn't be Trump, but it actually would be RFK that would be the threat. So, and the reason I'm saying this is because the truth is that unfortunately there are a lot of Americans who may not be pro-genocide, but they are very apathetic to the problems that are not directly affecting them at home. At least, what do they call them? The dinner table issues. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them, I know people personally that are on the cusp and still trying to figure out if they're actually going to vote for you or RFK Jr. And the reason why is because of his previous stance on the pandemic. There have been people that expressed that they're not sure where you stood before versus where you stand now, how you feel about how the pandemic was handled versus how you would handle something like that in the future. So Can you go ahead and clarify that for people who may still be on that RFK train? Because like I said, there may not be a lot of people that are pro-genocide, but they're not worried about that stance of his because they believe that, that the world is going to be set up for something else like that to happen. And they want to know that there's going to be somebody that fights for them in New York specifically, or to this day, they're still embroiled in legal battles. Teachers trying to get their money, firefighters and police officers trying to get their money because of them being cut off from their jobs for not getting the jab. So Can you clarify your stance then and what it would be going forward?
So as a medical doctor, you see medical advice change all the time, and it evolves. So there was a time when I tried to keep up with the science on the COVID vaccine, and then I quickly discovered it's got to be a full-time proposition if you're really going to stay on top of the science. So my view, and I say I have never endorsed mandates. I've always held the position that people need to be persuaded. It's Orwellian to force people to take medicines or have things injected into their bodies. So that is my basic feeling, as a medical doctor, that we should not be in the business of mandating medical treatments. That said, we need good science, and we need science that is separated from big pharma, from medical institutions, from basically profiteering and health insurance and all that. We need a firewall between our regulators and industry. And what I have put out there from the start is that we need to bring back the independence of our regulatory institutions. We need a firewall between to basically stop the revolving door, because right now people are going from industry into regulation, and it's not just the FDA, it's also the EPA.
You mean Congress into the regulation industry, right? Or
Congress, and also like our regulatory institutions. So it's both.
They're going into the actual private companies after. Got you.
Yeah. So you see Monsanto executives that are appointed to the Food and Drug Administration, and that's how we got GMOs approved. We got GMOs approved when one of the corporate vice presidents of Monsanto was at a head level in the FDA. And the same thing applies to the CDC, to the FAA, the federal airlines as well, because they, or look at the Sackler family, who basically wrote their own permissions for opioids. It's like, you can't keep up with this stuff. You can't keep up with the science of this stuff. We deserve to have the best of science and the best of community values. You cannot separate our community values there is no neutral science. Science, like reporting, you are bringing your soul as a reporter, you're bringing that to the table here. And if you are on the payroll for the insurance industry or big pharma, if you're on their payroll, that's a problem. Or if you are rotating between, a corporate position with Monsanto and being a reporter, your reporting is going to be extremely suspect. And the same is true for regulators. We shouldn't have regulators that are moving back and forth between industry and public service. And that is, to my mind, that is the answer here, because you can't just take one position and think that it's going to hold, like breast cancer and estrogens. I've seen that flip back and forth a million times over the last several decades. And you need to have people who don't have an investment in selling estrogens to evaluate the science and also to do the studies. So that is my overarching position. Number one, we don't do mandates, and a shutdown, a shutdown is outrageous. What Europe did when they were trying to get a handle on this was they provided payments to all the businesses that they wanted to pull back during the worst of their epidemic.
Same here in Brazil, actually. That same thing happened in Brazil.
Yes.
That was actually one of the good things that Bolsonaro actually did here, was make sure that nobody starved. Because if you're going to force everybody to not work, you can't pick and choose who gets paid in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't like taking hard and fast positions about what the advice should be about a vaccine or a certain kind of vaccine given a certain kind of epidemic. There's just a lot of uncertainty. What I will say is that I do not support mandates. They're Orwellian, and they should be avoided at all costs.
So basically what you're saying is, there's a lot of court cases going on right now. All those court cases where teachers were fired because their religious values weren't being respected. Teachers were fired because, police officers and public service members were fired. Even nurses were fired without pay. Basically, you're saying that you would effectively take the side of those who are trying to seek compensation for
Oh,
being wrongfully fired for mandates that should have never
yes.
existed.
That, yes. Now I haven't sat down and written a position, but just hearing that offhand, it seems like a no-brainer. That would be my,
Oh,
you know,
there's a lot. It's
support.
almost too. It's one of the. It's like it's specifically happening in New York, and it's almost too much to keep up with. There's
Yeah,
so many.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like Jeremy Corbyn, he holds this position as well, that
Mhm.
mandates should not be inflicted on workers. And I agree with Jeremy Corbyn, and the World Health Organization used to hold that position. I don't know where it stands now, but as the vaccine controversy evolved over the years, my feeling was increasingly that we need institutions we can trust. We do not have institutions that we can trust. And, we've just seen the revolving door spinning madly. And we also see money in politics, so that, positions, important positions, are basically bought. And that is the fundamental problem. We have a system which is fundamentally corrupted. It is part of the Declaration of Independence that just power derives from consent of the governed. The governed no longer consent because this system has been bought out from under us. That's where we need to correct it. And that's what our administration will do from the get-go.
That's good stuff. So it's November. What November 8th? What I think the election is November 7th. Whatever. The next day of the election, perhaps unfortunately you get 24% and you don't get the 27%, but and unfortunately you don't get to hold the Oval Office. What happens next? Because what you and Ajamu did the first time was absolutely extraordinary, but unfortunately, which I'm sure has to do a lot with the internal politics of the Green Party, a lot of the air got zapped out and the momentum was almost kind of pushed to a halt, and you guys had to almost start over to some degree. And if you didn't run this time, who knows where the Green Party would be. So how do you feel it would be different this time if you guys fall just short of the mark? Because I mean, unfortunately, the debate stage doesn't seem realistic, not because of anything to do with numbers, but literally because they just say, yeah, we're going to have 2 debates and maybe it's going to be on Zoom and nobody's going to be like, they just don't even care anymore about the rules, the previous, set of rules for debates. So even if you did get the numbers, I just don't believe they were allowed to happen. But let's just say after the election, you have this massive movement that you've built. What comes next? Because a lot of people, the reason that they're apathetic to voting is because they don't know the answer to that question. They want to know that the money, the organization, the effort, and the energy that was put behind your campaign will have a next chapter rather than the book being closed.
And what I find really encouraging is that people who are locking into the campaign now, this is not a one-off. This is not a one-shot. This is not just for November of 2024. People really get that we are on a trajectory right now towards oblivion, that our economy is melting down. It doesn't work for working people. It's only getting worse by the day. Our healthcare system is a mess. Our health is really in the toilet and continuing to decline. Half of renters cannot afford to keep a roof over their head. Half of renters are spending at least 30% of their income, which doesn't leave money to pay your student debts and put food on the table and all that. It's just not working. The climate is in meltdown, and we are butting up against nuclear conflict. Not only that, but Netanyahu wants a war with Iran. Iran is partnered with Russia. So this is like a pre-World War I situation with nuclear weapons thrown into the mix. The U.S. is...
By the way, Russia, I don't know if you saw, Russia actually did a nuclear exercise publicly the other day, about 3 or 4 days ago. So yeah, it's real.
Exactly. And Russia is doing this in response to France saying that they're going to send in their troops, and the UK saying, okay, it's great to use our weapons now directly into Russia. So, this is exactly what experts on Russia and Eastern Europe have been predicting for decades, that this is an existential threat to Russia. And when that happens, Russia will use nuclear weapons, which it is talking about using tactical nukes right now. This is absolutely nuts for a war that's unwinnable for Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting a proxy war for the U.S. to the last Ukrainian. It's just cruel and horrible. that this is happening at the behest of the U.S. Yes, it was a criminal invasion on the part of Russia and an illegal invasion, but Russia was really ginned up into this position. We would be doing the same thing. We did as much. We had our nuclear weapons in the air.
But with the violation of the Minsk agreement, do you really feel like it was illegal? Because, I mean, according to the Minsk agreement, which Ukraine technically violated, that was the rule was there would be peace as long as you don't like go around murdering Russians, which they did in both Crimea and the Donbass region. So do you feel like it was technically illegal? Because like you said, if there was such a treaty that we created with, I don't know, like Mexico, for example, and they violated it, we technically would be justified because the Minsk agreement was agreed upon by everybody that they had to follow it. So do you feel like it's okay to codify that as illegal? Maybe, not really all that cool, but do you feel like it's fair to codify as illegal given that the Minsk agreement was violated?
That's my understanding from those who know international law better than I do. That's my understanding, is that it is technically illegal. But I feel like, it was one illegality inside of a much bigger illegality, which is the U.S. having ginned up this war, going back on its promise to Gorbachev that it would not move 1 inch to the east. There were all sorts of guarantees that were being violated here by the U.S. And Russia went all out, to negotiate. What Russia wanted at the end of the day was neutrality. They wanted Ukraine to be like Austria after the Second World War. There was nothing extraordinary about that ask whatsoever. And as you pointed out, we would not allow Russia's missiles to be put in Cuba in the 1960s. So it's like people are brain dead who don't get this. They don't get it because they're kind of bought into the system, or they're propagandized, or they're brain dead, or whatever. They don't get it. This was an absolutely avoidable war, and this could have been prevented, on the part of the U.S. This is just a tragedy that this is taking place.
Yeah, no, it's you're they're sending people to a meat grinder. That's the only way I can think of to describe it. It's sad, and you know what? Ukraine does have its problems. They literally have neo-Nazi battalions, and I tell people, one of the first things I actually said when Joe Biden got elected, and I don't know why it was one of the first things that came to my mind, but on my first stream, I said, damn, I feel bad for Zelensky. Everybody's like, what? Zelensky? Why? I was like, y'all don't remember what happened during the Obama administration? Like, y'all think that they're just going to let Ukraine slide? That's going to be one of the first places they put their hands on. And Zelensky has no way out now because he has this neo-Nazi battalion that's on his ass. He has this country where he doesn't know who to trust because half of his administration is in the pockets of the United States. And this specific guy, Joe Biden. And you almost, like I said, I don't feel bad for him, but you almost kind of feel bad for him because what is he going to do? If he bows out, he's gone. He's dead. His family's probably dead. Yeah. And so it's a bad position to be in, and it just really just shows how sinister the United States is. They put people in these impossible positions. So maybe if you meant to make change, like Fitzo, for example, who just, they had an assassination attempt on his life solely by saying, I'm not going to give any more weapons to Ukraine, and we need to try to advocate for peace. If you try, this is what happens. They're showing you.
Yeah. It's scary if you challenge umpire. You're in for a run for your money. And just in follow-up to 2016 and what happened after 2016, you may recall that I was being, there was an effort to criminalize me as a Russian asset. And so part of the reason, talk about, plots and plans to basically hijack your enemy, and to disable them. So I was hit with these charges from the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I was then investigated for 3 years. For 3 years, I was tied up fighting a Senate Intelligence Committee investigation. Now, at the end of the day,
because you were sitting at a table, I remember. Just because you were sitting at a table, I remember that. It's crazy. Yeah, that was wild.
It didn't matter what I was saying. My message at that conference was very clear. It was about a peace offensive in the Middle East. It was about a global Green New Deal, and it was about getting rid of nuclear weapons. All those things need to be done. And I must say that I think the example of talking to your adversaries is absolutely critical, and to try to, denigrate that, and make that a liability is ridiculous. So, the effort to criminalize me around that. But I was basically, strapped for 3 years dealing with the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation, which came up negative. They gave me a clean bill of health, but of course the press still doesn't, recognize that, and they still try to, run this smear campaign for all it's worth. But that had a lot to do with why the Green Party did not move forward, because its leadership was basically neutralized for 3 years.
Hamstrung you, so you couldn't do anything.
Yes, exactly. And this time we need to be ready for that. We need to be ready, because I'm sure they're coming at me with some kind of a legal case, of one form or another. We need to be ready, and the party has to be ready. We need a plan that's going to go into effect. My intent after the election had been to then basically go around to the activist chapters and help for the campaign and help them transition into the party structure to continue the fight and to continue building this coalition. It's got to happen, So yeah, that's in the works. There's a lot of.
I don't think a lot of people knew about you being tied up for 3 years in an investigation. That explains, honestly, a lot. That really does explain a lot.
Yeah, totally.
Wow.
I mean, they sapped hundreds of thousands of dollars from my campaign funds as well, in order to pay for attorneys. Yeah, no, it was an all-out sabotage. This was
especially because y'all broke. If I'm not mistaken, you guys actually broke fundraising records for the Green Party in 2016, correct?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. It looks like they wanted to make sure that you couldn't take that momentum and potentially do the 2020 campaign and capitalize on everything that you guys had built in 2016.
Yes. And I have to say, there were some new factions that suddenly emerged as our campaign 2016 was winding up. New factions who stuck around long enough to basically try to cancel me, and make me a controversial figure within the Green Party. And once I seemed to be removed, they disappeared. So, I mean, to me, this just smacks of, a routine bread and butter case.
Democratic Party 101. That's what they do.
That's what they're doing now. So just be on the lookout. It's going to happen. You got to anticipate it. And, the answer to that kind of internal shenanigans is to have a strong enough party so that people can run against people who come in out of nowhere and they suddenly want to be your fearless leader and they walk into open positions. We need to have enough people who are active in the party, so that we're not electing into high office people without a track record, in an era where the Democrats are basically looking to cause trouble internally.
Yeah. So speaking of which, everybody is looking for the tea. They want to know, who are you considering for your running mate? Have you made the decision? Is it still on the table? Do you got anybody in mind?
We do have a few people in mind, and they don't look like me. And a number of people who would be just really exciting to work with. But we have been so swamped with New York that everything has kind of been on hold for the last month or 6 weeks even. And so we hope to get back to that, as a full bore campaign. And hopefully
we can't get a short list. We can't get like a little short list, just a little short list.
No. So I hope to be able to put out a short list and get some public input on that once we have kind of finalized that short list, which is still not final. But there are many ways that our campaign, can work in really exciting coalitions with related groups.
Hey, I don't know what the rules are for this, but you do got Claudia over there. I don't know, because you said y'all working on coalitions, and we don't know how many states you're going to be in. I know a lot of states have weird rules, like you can run on multiple parties, or like run on multiple ballot lines. And it might be worth considering setting something up like that. I don't know. I'm just saying. It's just an idea, but. We know that you're really concentrated on New York, and I really hope that you guys I saw all the pictures that you got. There's a lot of people out there helping you get those signatures. And so, what can people do to help? With not just New York, but help the campaign going forward. Oh, and the last thing, So, given the state of the world and really the economy of the United States, mutual aid has actually become a more popular discussion.
Yeah.
And is there a chance that perhaps, I don't know what the legality of it is, but is there a chance that perhaps Green Party chapters, after all this is said and done, as far as the president is concerned, can convert or start chapters within the Green Party to start mutual aid, to kind of like just transform that grassroots energy into people power so that they can rely on each other rather than rely on the government?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Green parties are like local activists, and they can engage in, local self-sufficiency and mutual aid. Absolutely. The social movements go hand in hand. You can't have a political movement or an election movement without being really part and parcel of your community, and mutual aid is part of that. So yeah, absolutely. That's definitely where we have to go from here. We need to be really entrenched in our communities in every way. So yeah, mutual aid can certainly be a big part of that. And, if people want to help right now and seize the political moment, because it's like a political movement is not any good without a social movement. That's where it gets its legitimacy and its traction and really grows. And so I encourage people, not to ignore. It's not like the voting booth is more important than the street. It's not. But we don't want to ignore it either. It is a potential tool which can be very powerful. And, you can argue that in the absence of challenging power, you don't go anywhere. Like, that's what Frederick Douglass said. Power concedes nothing without a demand. You have to make the demand of power. And that's essentially what a political party has to be about. And it's also a coalition that has an explicit agenda that comes up from the grassroots. And so you're clear what it is that you're fighting for. It's not just one issue, it's a bunch of issues, and it's a coalition that stays together over time. Because, you find if you work on a coalition, it takes work. The coalition doesn't maintain itself. And a party is simply a coalition that recognizes that, hey, it takes work. We got to keep this thing going. And so to help us seize the moment now in the voting booth, because that's what this moment is about. But then there's all kinds of stuff after this election, that's more the social movements and mutual aid and all that. But right now, and there's local offices too, which are important.
The local offices. I mean, that's a big deal. And I know that Green Party actually had a lot of success in 2016, really because of the attention that you guys helped bring at the local level that doesn't actually get discussed all that much. Which is why I was trying to explain. I remember whenever the whole situation with Cornel West happened, I was trying to explain to people. I'm like, y'all do know, if he just like abandons the Green Party, they don't have a candidate, they're going to start losing opportunities to be governors, win local offices. Like, every state has such very specific rules that there has to be somebody there who understands that responsibility, because it isn't just about your campaign anymore. It's about everyone in every state, in every city, who could benefit if you handle your business. Even if you don't get necessarily your office that you're aiming for, somebody might. And that's very important. So, Jill, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, in my home state, for example, we have people who are like the chair of their board of selectmen, which is like a city council, but for a smaller and more rural town. We have a lot of select board people, school
board of education people I know that were Green Party members that ended up.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, I don't know, somewhere around 150, people who hold office who tend to get reelected at very high rates. So yeah, I mean, this is what we need to build, and we are fighting a mountain of disinformation and, fear campaigning and smear campaigning. Most political parties that are grassroots, that don't have corporate support, they're gone within 10 years. They're absolutely gone. You can look at Peace and Freedom Party, which is a great party that held office, or rather they had ballot access in somewhere around 15 or 20 states, maybe 20 years ago. Now they have ballot access in one state, or the socialist parties of the early 1900s. They too have been beaten back to where they hold a city council position here and there. So it's very hard. There's enormous forces simply for not being strong, simply for not having won already. That doesn't say that we are weak parties. Actually, we are incredibly strong to survive against this corporate onslaught that we're constantly fighting. So reject the propaganda that tells you we're powerless. We're not powerless. We're actually powerful. And this is an absolutely perfect storm. And people can help by going to JillStein2024.com. If you're in a position to throw some money into the hat, that would be extremely helpful. We're completing the ballot access fight in New York. If you are in New York, there's one more day to collect. That's tomorrow. And you can go to that website, and I'll tell you the exact place. It's JillStein2024.com/NY ballot, New York ballot. You can download the petition. There's a little video how to do it. If you can collect, if you can go out tomorrow and collect 20 signatures even, and there are 100 more people who collect 20 signatures, that's huge. Every signature counts right now because we think we are at the qualifying margin, but the Democrats are going to be whittling it down. So it's those extras that could totally save the world right now and put an anti-genocide campaign on the ballot. And yeah, some people may have their single issues, but there's an awful lot of people out there who want to end student debt, who want free public higher education, who need healthcare as a human right, who want to end the endless wars. We've paid $12,000 per household this year for the war machine. $12,000 per household. And it's like $50,000 since 9/11. These wars that basically just create failed states and mass refugee migrations and continuing terrorist threats. This is an outrage what is being done to us and to the rest of the world with our money. We need to be in this election and talking about it loud and clear. And I would not accept any propaganda about it being a hopeless race. It's a potentially winnable race. And if we don't win the office, but we win the day by coming out of this with millions of new voters who are going to be active. And I have to say, the people who are joining in now in this fight against genocide, they are here for the long haul. And it's really exciting. We're seeing new Green Party chapters being established, including in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the heart of the Arab American community. We're really seeing a whole new slew of people with a lot of skills in organizing, who are organizational people who are now seeing that at the end of the day, this is a political fight. That's not all of it, but it is a critical dimension. And if we don't fight politically, all the other fights amount to a hill of beans. So it's really exciting. Join the team. And, go again to JillStein2024.com and be a part of it. And, together we are absolutely unstoppable, and we need to stand up, forget the lesser evil, and fight for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. And together we are unstoppable.
I don't want to hold you up much longer, but I do have to ask, do you have any words of encouragement or anything to say about Julian Assange's situation before you go?
We need to keep fighting. This is another reason that we need to get on the ballot in New York, because it says, on day one, Julian Assange would be free. He's out of confinement, and he is compensated for years of his life that have been destroyed, and his health. He's compensated. And it's not only him, it's all whistleblowers, actually, as well as all drug offenders for simple use, possession, or cultivation. So it's a whole lot of people who get out of jail on day one. But what it says to Biden, because Biden and Blinken can end the torture and persecution of Julian Assange right now in the blink of an eye. And for them to see that we are rising up strong, and this is a leading issue for us, that helps put the pressure on them. And it's a tribute to everyone who's been fighting for Julian Assange. It's a tribute to our power that they've been forced into this position now, that the court, in fact, the so-called High Court in the UK, has been pressured to take this position. So this is a really good time to keep the heat on and to get the case dismissed. That should happen immediately. It's great that they can appeal, but it's a travesty that he has to spend one more day in a high security dungeon, basically, at Belmarsh prison. So keep the heat on, consider it a sign of success, and let's double down and free Julian Assange and free ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jill. I appreciate your time. Once again, let everybody know where they can donate to and how they can help you get on the ballot in New York.
Thank you so much. And also the next two battles after New York's going to be over basically on Monday. We're counting the signatures and we submit them on Tuesday. After that, it's Illinois and then Indiana. And if you are in the vicinity, if you're in those states or nearby, people coming in to help with these petition drives is a complete game changer. It's really powerful. So consider lending a hand. If you can't get out, a donation is also a complete game changer. And again, that's jillstein2024.com. So join us, and together we're going to change the future and create an America and a world that works for all of us. And thank you so much, Niko, for your wonderful reporting and your powerful resistance for our right to a free press that is accountable to us, that informs and empowers us. So we couldn't do this without you. Big kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And for everybody else, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream interview on For the People podcast. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.
Peace.